Star Wars, Episode 7, and Even Newer Hope, forget about that last one, that was just a practice hope, I guess, is a movie that was pretty much doomed to mediocrity from the start. I remember when it came out, the most common praise I ever heard about this movie was, man, I am glad that movie didn't push the envelope. Thank God JJ didn't do anything new or interesting. That might have just been too much. Whew! The film wanted to be just a loose copy of the original Star Wars with better CGI and I guess younger, hotter actors. So I guess you can take this first part to be either a success or a failure depending on your perspective. But let's look at what really sucks, which is to say, everything else. But specifically, the aspects of the original Star Wars that they ported over, they did with very little thought put into the actual setting or characters. Have you gone back and listened to the conversation between Uncle Owen and C-3PO? There's actually a lot of thought put into it, and it makes sense Luke would grow up on a remote moisture farm. They'd probably need one of those on a desert planet. It might not be as flashy as the giant wrecks of massive star destroyers littering the desert landscape, but there's a lot more thought put into it, and in the long term, fans will appreciate that. The planet has its own lore, it has politics associated with it, it has people doing jobs. I don't know, it's just, all the massive CGI set pieces will never compare to those little details that make the world feel lived in. That's why the franchise keeps returning to Tatooine, and why Jakku is known as nothing but, well, Diet Tatooine. It's got nothing to do with it being Luke's home, it's because it was actually developed. And speaking of not developing your story, let's talk about shortcuts. Was anyone else pulled out of the movie when Finn just turns around and starts gunning down other stormtroopers? Like, you literally haven't had time to take off your armor yet. Give it a minute, maybe, man, come on. And I'm not saying that stormtroopers inherently needed development, but if you're going to make an ex-stormtrooper a main character, yeah, they need development. The writers sacrificed the ability of the stormtroopers to be a faceless mob for the heroes to just gun down once they gave them a face. This really should be affecting Finn more than they let it, but the movie just wants to have its cake and shoot it too. And speaking of Finn killing stormtroopers, let's talk about the second worst scene in the movie. Forgive me for backpedaling here, but we're going to begin this section with a story time. And this story begins where all great stories in the Midwest start. At Walmart, a wide-eyed, decade-younger version of myself was perusing the clearance section, and does anyone else remember Disney Infinity? It cratered right before The Force Awakens hit theaters, which I only remember because I remember seeing the Disney Infinity models, the Star Wars ones, on sale for $3 each in the clearance section. Trust me, I'm going somewhere with this. And when I was looking through those, because, you know, I'm a nerd, of course I wanted to buy them when they were cheap, I swear this is what I found. One Han Solo, one Boba Fett, a small handful of Chewbacca's, and racks upon racks next to a small mountain of Poe Damerons. I had to drive to a different store to find a Darth Vader. Mission accomplished, by the way. And I mention this because, as a devoted Star Wars nerd, I noticed pretty immediately that actually, on these models, a lot of the individual details, like the weapons and the clothing, is surprisingly accurate. So when I found a dual pack of Rey and Finn, it had my interest piqued. It sounds weird, I know, but it gave me some idea that maybe they put the same level of thought into these new characters. You know, why not? So I went to see the movie when someone else was willing to buy my ticket, and I experienced that oddly deliberate moment where Han Solo hands Finn his iconic new blaster, which Han gets out of a closet that's on a ship that he hasn't been on in 20 years, but shh. Then the canteen scene happens. It's boring. That should really be its own section, but this video could easily have a part 2. And when we're done with that, we finally get the first action scene with Finn. The first chance to use his iconic new blaster as stormtrooper cannon fodder is everywhere. The First Order has... stupid name. The First Order has arrived. And what's the first thing that Finn says? I need a weapon. I can't believe I actually have to explain this, but JJ, if you want the glory of having created Finn, this great new character with his iconic blaster, he has to, like, use it, and you have to not turn his fight scenes into a chance to glorify a different character with a different iconic weapon. Just a thought. But let's talk about the actual worst scene of the movie, because honestly, this one I just find funny. I can stomach watching this piece of shit film for the most part, but there is one scene I cannot get through without bursting into fits of laughter, and it's the war room scene. The Resistance pulls up a 3D render of the Death Star, which they have on hand for some reason, and then they pull up a render of the Starkiller base, which they have on hand for some reason. These people couldn't even find a functioning map of the galaxy, and yet they have all these schematics just lying around. And the crowd gasps upon seeing that the Starkiller base put next to the Death Star is so much bigger. Like, I can't over-exaggerate. Like, it's... I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. Like, this is... Imagine Disney buys Lord of the Rings. God help us all. And while... And in the process... And... Okay, I just gotta start over. Okay, Disney buys Lord of the Rings, and they release movie number 4, The Fellowship of the Other, more powerful ring that shoots lasers or some shit. Forget about that last ring, that one was just a practice ring, I guess. And like, just to set the stakes, Gandalf, because of course Gandalf shows up, because of course he has to. He needs to be there and to say how cool the new main characters are and how much better they are than the old characters, and then die tragically. And he pulls up, I don't know, he somehow shows the heroes an image of Sauron, okay? And just to set the stakes for this new franchise, this new version of the franchise, he shows them Disney's new original villain, Saruman, who's like Sauron, but taller. Like, this scene is a failure of writing on a level where it doesn't even make me mad, it's just pathetic. This movie was never good. It was never good. It was always a piece of shit, and everyone loved it. And then the following string of toxic positivity took down the whole damn franchise because no one was willing to just say, hey, Disney, fix this. Do better. Quite the irony. So, what did you think of The Force Awakens? Did you think it was bad, or are you wrong? Has your opinion changed over the years? I actually am kind of curious to know if you guys have seen your opinions lessen on this film, or if they've risen. I don't know. I'm genuinely curious. Let me know if you guys want to see a part 2. Trust me, I have plenty of fodder for this. Although I could also just go to The Last Jedi, but that's going to be a whole deal. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.